I kind of laugh and have a decent time with folks on live stream. I think some people come in there and they get disappointed that you can't be extremely serious in live stream when you've got 3, 4, 500 people, looking and talking at you at once. They want a 5-minute long explanation, which of course would upset, the 4 or 500 other people. You just can't do that. So questions and answers have to be short and sweet. Live stream is, of course, not geared towards that, where everybody else stays quiet while I spend 5 minutes answering a detailed question that someone posed. But that's the nature of live stream. I think a lot of people don't necessarily consider that. I like to be serious in this. And of course, I've written a free article. It's called A Primer on the THEURGY of Liberation, and the link is below in the description. Let me repeat that again. It's called A Primer on the THEURGY of Liberation. And of course, I go over various things, the actual meaning between melite and meneme, true Platonic, i.e. metaphysical recollection, i.e. sati or smriti or anamnesis, and of course, people have a generalized idea of recollection, like what you had for breakfast yesterday. That's conventional, conscious recollection. But the very term in English, even though English is pretty bad for metaphysics, things that are good for metaphysics is Greek, Pali/Sanskrit, then Latin, and English is somewhere further down the line, is the fact that recollection means to recollect things that are separated out. In other words, they're distributed, right? I used to pan for gold kind of I went to Dahlonega, Georgia, which is east of Atlanta. I wasn't doing it for money. It's just kind of exciting, and you see little pieces of gold in there, and not that I'm a gold miner at all or a person that professionally goes looking for gold, but gold people, most gold today is powdered gold, like little tiny flakes and whatnot, and they heap it together, and of course it gets melted and weighed and assayed. And it's about recollecting things together. So the term recollection, i.e. memory, but metaphysical memory, is really no different. It's one of the few perfect English words, to talk about the methodology of genuine theurgy. And there's two things that fundamentally confuse people. There's actually more than two, especially when it comes to metaphysics. Also true is the same of physics, by the way, since Nikola Tesla said light is nothing other than a sound wave in the ether. And I've talked about this endlessly, and then I'll get back to metaphysics in just a second here, is that every human being suffers the idea that if a speed is said of something, speed, then something is moving from point A to point B. We talk about the speed of light, which of course everybody on this earth suffers the delusion that something is moving from point A to point B. Speed means something is moving. It was here, now it's not there, and it's moving on to whatever destination. But that's not the case with light. Light is not an emission. It's a rate of induction or the hysteresis of the ether. Same is true of sound. We have the speed of sound, right? Breaking the sound barrier. Everybody suffers the same delusion about sound as they do about light. Sound's an emission. But it's not an emission. When I generate sound and vibrate this microphone, which generates an electrical signal, we have this idea that something is moving or something is being emitted, usually both, of course, but that's not the case. Nothing is moving, it's a disturbance of the medium, be it the oxygen and the nitrogen, which of course is vibrated, right? Vibration of the medium. And that's exactly what light is. Light is not an emission. The so-called speed of sound, i.e. the rate of induction of the disturbance, changes depending on the density of the air, the temperature, which is no different than density. Same is true of light. It changes glass, water, air, vacuum, so on and so forth. The second thing that people make a mistake on, just like the idea of the speed of light. Light has a speed, 186 blah, blah, blah. It's not a speed. It's this idea of concentration. Just would you say the speed of light, everybody assumes that light is an emission and that it's moving. Everybody, when they hear the word concentration, and I will not use the word meditation, I explicitly give the connotation and denotation of that horrific English word, which is one of the worst words in the world, and I give you the reason why it's one of the worst words in the world. So I will not use that word meditation like that. So the articles in the description below, it's called A Primer on the THEURGY of Liberation. When you say concentration, this is what everybody thinks, just like the same thing with the speed of light. Think that you're going to exercise your thoughts and engage in objective cogitation. I'm going to concentrate on something. Kind of like Superman focuses his eyes and laser beams emit out of his eyes, and you're going to focus on something, whether it be objectively real, like this rock, or subjectively impalpable, subjectively, an idea, a premise. People, when they hear the word concentration, this is immediately what they think of. You can't think your way out of a thinking box. Concentration is almost as bad as the word meditation. But being concentric, if we actually think about it, just like recollection, yes? What are we actually doing? What is the opposite of dilution? Everything starts and ends with the attribute of the absolute. The Greeks called this the euristos dias, they called it tolma, they called it ananke. It's primordial agnosis, yeah? Agnosis has a privative A in front of the word gnosis. Gnosis, of course, is wisdom, understanding, or being self-centric. And of course, in every branch of metaphysics, there's two selves. The transcendent self, analogous to the signal, don't take that analogy too far, and of course the corporeal, the existential self, i.e. the thing you see in the mirror when you brush your teeth, which has a beginning in time, and anything has a beginning in time has an end in time, and it's consubstantial. Consubstantial is a really English, easy premise. I explain that too in the article below. It means composed of two or more things and has a beginning in time, and therefore cannot be a refuge by definition. It can't be transcendent. It can't be eternal. It can't be a refuge. It can't be anything that is commanded or pointed to by any genuine guru throughout the history of all humanity. I don't care what branch of metaphysics we're talking about, meaning true metaphysics. Advaita Vedanta, the Upanishads, the five Nikayas. There's a lot of the Indians of Plotinus, Timaeus, Parmenides, Syrianus, Nemesius, Proclus, Iamblichus, on and on and on. They're all pointing to one and the same thing. You have to think outside the scope, and English may not be your first language, but whether it's Spanish or French or Deutsch or по-русски языка in Russian, concentration implies that you're focused on something objective. It doesn't have to be palpably objective, but it has to be something objective. And this is not what metaphysical concentration is. Just like everybody suffers the idea about the speed of light. It's moving, it's an emission. And that's not the case at all. They hear the word, and everybody has this connotation in their head of the word concentration. But what would be the logical methodology of monistic concentration? We can't say unfocus, even though that's not a word. Can't say defocus, yeah? We can't say focus for certain, because we're talking about thinking your way out of a thinking box once again, which is completely impossible. What would be metaphysical concentration? Metaphysical concentration goes by many different names in many different languages, because nothing is known except the modality of the knower. It's called Apophaticism. There's that word which is in the title of my YouTube username. Theoria Apophasis, which means retroductive theurgy, or retroductive assimilation. Theurgy, or theoria, through apophaticism, i.e. via negativa. The Indians called this neti. Yes, not this, not that. Subjective synthesis, or with a true metaphysical concentration, by means of objective negation. Not this, not that, right? The whole idea of tat tvamasi, or that thou art, is no different than saying thou art the signal and not the broadcast, because the broadcast has a beginning in time, and it has a Cartesian coordinate within the existential cosmos. The broadcast, of course, comes out of the speaker of the radio. It's the interpolation of the signal as done by the radio. It has a beginning in time, because the broadcast is not the signal. People think it is. I've tuned into so-and-so broadcast at 98.1 megahertz, for example. You're not tuning into the broadcast. You set a modulation that is in a harmonic vis-a-vis the tuning board and the radio and the antenna, and the interpolation of that modulation, of course, is brought out through the speaker. False subjective centering, yeah? Objective centering and transcendent centering. I've talked about this in the article too. False subjective centering. We're actually focused on something either in this body or something in the objective world. Of course, nothing we focus on in an objective world, palpably objective, of course, would be any locus for transcendence. But people literally do try to think their way out of a thinking box. I've seen people, you can almost smell the wood burning between their ears. They're working really hard to think their way out of the thinking box, and it's completely impossible. People just don't have it within them. And this is the reason why I use the speed of light analogy. Same as the speed of sound, reason why Nikola Tesla said, light's nothing other than a sound wave in the ether. Well, sound is not an emission. It's a disturbance of the medium. Light is not an emission. It's a disturbance of the medium, a different medium, of course, not oxygen and nitrogen. This idea of concentration, making concentric what is diluted. Well, what is diluted and what is the reason for dilution? Primordial agnosis. Primordial agnosis eventually leads to what? False identity. Seeing yourself as the psychophysical in the mirror. False identity. Could you think your way out of a thinking box? Could you do anything within this temporal psychophysical that would, of course, beget any manner or any level of disobjectification, i.e. apophaticism, i.e. the end goal and fruit of neti-neti? What would objective negation culminate to? It is not either, because most people think metaphysics is like some sort of crystal rubbing, white lighter, new age nonsense, completely illogical, unsensible, makes no coherent sense, and I agree with that. You know, the New Age movement is 95% poppycock, twaddle, hokum, and illogical nonsense. It makes you suspend belief. You know, you're forced to do it, to believe in it. Well, it's completely illogical. Yeah, you don't have to worry about, you know, whether it makes any sense or not. You just need to do it. Genuine metaphysics vis-a-vis the Greeks and the Indians are not like that at all, nor should they be, because nature and natural order are not illogical. They don't require the suspension of belief. Some people say it's not the suspension of disbelief, it's suspension of belief. I'm talking about the suspension of belief. You have to just know what makes common sense and just turn your brain off and believe in it. I'm not interested in any of that stuff. Neither is Platonic, Greek, Pythagorean, the Nikayas, the Upanishads, Advaita Vedanta. Anything that is logical, sensible, and true require any of that from anybody. But people cannot get their mind out of this. People say, well, transcendence is like purification. I say, well, you know, your analogy is loosely, very superficially crude, but let's be logical here. What is potential is not actual. I ask people, can you get any lumber out of an acorn? It's like, well, no, you can't. People love to talk about free will. The answer to free will, people, it's amazing that so-called philosophers, or not philosophers, Western existentialists, have been debating free will for ages, whether humans have free will or they don't have free will. Well, nobody has free will until it's actualized. What is potential is not actual. You can't get lumber out of an acorn, you know, until you nurture it and plant it and, you know, give a lot of nurturing and sunlight and water and so on and so forth for decades to get a big oak tree, right? Well, an acorn and an oak tree are genetically 100% identical. That, of course, is completely irrefutable. What is potential is not actual. The same is true of transcendence. And it is hyperlogical. It doesn't require it doesn't require you believe in nonsense. Yeah. Natural order doesn't work that way. True metaphysics don't work that way, nor would they. Gold is gold, right? There's no such thing as the purification of gold. Yet we have that idea. Well, like bullion, 0.999 pure. I used to invest in gold bullion decades ago when I was younger. Super pure gold, yep. Gold is never, ever, ever purified because gold is gold is gold is gold. It always is. So what is the process whereby which we have this idea of pure gold? I mean, there's some host rocks out there that are mined, let's say, there'd be 30 ounces of gold per metric ton, which is a really good gold mine. I think the average like gold mine where they pull up rocks that look like this, yeah, will have like 3 or 4 ounces per metric ton. Yeah, I mean, you look at this, it's like, this is just a piece of crap. You throw it on the rubbish heap. There's nothing here. It's like, well, if you crush it, you apply these different chemicals to it and make it really baby powdered and put it into a slurry and drop in some more chemicals, you're actually separating out the host matrix from the stuff that's in there, like seawater. All seawater has gold in it, but I mean, it takes an enormous amount of energy and a whole lot of seawater to get an ounce of gold. But all seawater has gold in it. Yeah. The only problem is that an enormous amount of energy, super tremendous amount of seawater needs to be processed to get an ounce of gold. But gold is gold is gold. So what is the process whereby which we are talking about metaphysical concentration? Because we're not talking about trying to think your way out of a thinking box, and yet that's what people think and do. I'm going to concentrate. Concentrate on what? I'm going to concentrate on getting my way out. You can't concentrate your way. You can't think your way out of a thinking box. It doesn't work that way. If gold itself in the matrix rock were sentient in a transcendental sense, how would it extract itself out for greater and greater purity and concentration from host matrix? That host matrix is no different than primordial agnosis. It's hyperlogical, actually. What is a signal without modulation? Genuine transcendence is a complete erasure of modulation. Then one would not be a broadcast at all because there would not be disturbance, which would be tunable, because no radio on Earth can tune a signal which has no modulation. Think about that for about 5 or 10 minutes, and then you'll have an epiphany. If you don't, then you're not very smart. There's no radio on Earth that can tune a signal that has no modulation, and then it, of course, would not be a signal by definition at all, because a signal is the absolute implication of a modulation with ABC, XYZ frequency, 5 megahertz, 5 gigahertz, 230 hertz, a modulation. If it's modulated, it's tunable, because it has a transverse footprint, which is tunable by any specific antenna that is able to tune that modulation. So what is the true meaning of concentration? What is the true meaning of extraction? What is the via negativa of disubjectification, which is the removal of primordial agnosis? It is hyperlogical, it is extremely simple, yet people don't have the mind that has ever thought on that railroad track, if you will. Just as no human being on this earth, I don't know of one except for Tesla, that's ever put their, well, Dollar did it about light too, and I think so did Walter Russell, so I take that back, there's a few regarding light, that have ever put their mind on that railroad track. Speed of light is not a speed. It's not an emission. Neither is sound. Concentration is not concentration, whether palpable or not. It is making something concentric and removal of which it is, and whereby which it is diluted due to not first cause or original sin or prima causa, which is unique to creationism, but due to primordial agnosis. Agnosis is no different than saying illumination, by the way. Not light, but illumination. The extrinsic attribute of light is illumination. The extrinsic attribute of self, i.e. transcendent self, not psychophysical self, is agnosis. Gnosis and wisdom are both, in all forms of metaphysics, no different than the transcendent self. What, therefore, then, is the privative A put before gnosis? Agnosis. Well, it means ignorance. Not conventional ignorance like a stupid person. Duh. That's something different. I'm talking about transcendent agnosis, which is the cause, but it's not a cause. It's extrinsic attribute. There's no first cause or original sin in monistic metaphysics. Either Greek, Pythagorean, Indian, Advaita Vedanta, Upanishads, and Nikayas. Natural order and genuine mystic metaphysics are highly logical. They are not craziness that requires you to turn your brain off about what makes no sense. So it's just silliness. So yeah, it is silly. It doesn't make any sense. You just got to turn your brain off. That's religion. That's the realm of religion. That's not, and religion and beliefs, no difference, saying one and the same thing. It's not that realm. Anyway, the link to the article that I wrote is below. It's called A Primer on the THEURGY of Liberation. It's a free download. I hope you like it. Any donations always warmly welcome. You could email me your thoughts about it. Thanks so much for watching. Lux Veritas.